Shall we start?
Yeah, we can start.
Okay, thank you. I'm Alpa Shah from Applied Mechanics Department and one of the coordinator of this STTP. Pleased to welcome you all in the third session of the program. For this session, we have with us Dr. B.S. Shashank as our expert. Dr. B.S. Shashank is faculty member in Department of Civil Engineering at BITS Pilani. He completed his Bachelor's of Engineering from SJCE Mysore in 2011 and completed his Master's from NIT Tiruchirappalli in 2014 with dissertation title Investigation of Microorganisms Treated Weak Soil Under Dynamic Loading. Dr. Shashank obtained his doctoral degree from IIT Mumbai in 2019 with research on investigation on biogeochemical interactions in sand under the supervision of Dr. D.N. Singh. His areas of research interest are biogeotechnics, sensors for geomaterials characterization, microbial-induced corrosion, soil-environmental interaction, bioremediation of contaminated sites, sustainable enhancement of soil for agriculture, etc. He published numerous papers at national level and international level. He worked as visiting researcher in 2015 and 17 at the University of Strathclyde under International Research Staff Exchange Scheme. Dr. Shashank has received individual fellowship funded by European Union this year to pursue research at the University of Leeds, UK. I welcome Dr. Shashank to share his expertise on this subject. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. So can I start sharing my screen? Thanks a lot for the elaborate introduction that you have. So good afternoon, one and all. I'll try to keep it short. I know it's a afternoon session, so let me try and make it as much interactive as possible. And please feel free to interrupt me wherever you feel like discussing or wanting to have a discussion over at any point of time. And I would be more than happy if the session becomes more and more interactive and it allows people to participate effectively in this training program. So I'm B.S. Shashank. I work in the Department of Civil Engineering in BITS Pilani. In the Pilani campus, I have recently joined over here. So I pursued my PhD in geotechnical engineering, specifically on focusing on the biogeotechnics at IIT Bombay under the supervision of Professor D.N. Singh. I'll try to speak today with you all related to the relevance of biological sciences in geotechnical engineering. So why do I say it's a relevance of biological sciences in geotechnical engineering? There's a reason to that. So for example, I'll just start my slides with some of the scanning electron microscopy images. So these are some of the natural soils that we have studied, and what we have observed is, let me just take a pointer over here. So these are some of the soils that we have seen, natural soils. In fact, it's not modified or there is no amendments made to these soils except this center one. These are all the soils where we can find some of the biological activity existing in the soil. So these are chains of microorganisms and these are some coatings by the deposition which was laid out by the bacteria or other organisms on the soil grains. You can also see some deposition of crystals. So you can see some deposition of the crystals over here. So these are the bacterial cells. So why do I try to start with this? What do I intend to say? You know, we have been trying to say that soil is conventionally in geotechnical engineering, what we say is that soil does not undergo any changes with time, or its properties do not undergo any changes with time, and it's purely an inert, from the biological perspective, it's purely an inert material. But truly speaking, it's not a lifeless entity, it has a lot of life in it. And this we know by our common experiences in the day. We know that soil supports life, and the soil does have certain soil is a natural habitat for various microorganisms. But do these natural habitat make any difference to the behavior of the soil? Um, the latest studies do say that yes, it does make a changes to the behavior of the soil mass. So what is soil? What is this material soil that we are all encountering in our day-to-day activities? You know, we have this sedimentary rock which, because of the high pressure and temperature, it undergoes changes, and it transforms into a metamorphic rock which, you know, goes underneath the earth's crust, becomes magma, then it rises up again in the form of volcanoes. The lava flows down, it forms the rock upon cooling. But then comes the crucial term called soil or sediments, which is formed because of the majorly because of the physical and chemical weathering, but the initiation point happens because of the biological weathering, and that's why I write the biological weathering in the first instance. Though you might say that the physical weathering is the major cause because of the physical fragmentation of the soil and the chemical transformation, most of this is initiated because of the biological weathering, and we'll see how does that happen. And this sediments again, you know, transforms into sedimentary rock, and this rock cycle goes on. So how does this sediment is formed because of the weathering? So there are various biogeochemical processes that undergo beneath the geo-environment. That's the ground. You know, in Desigan soil mechanics, what happens is we consider only the mechanical loading of the soil mass. But is it really true? You know, as I said in my previous slide, we talked about the physical and chemical weathering of the soil mass. Say this is a rock mass which is a continuum in nature. So what happens if biogeochemical process takes place? Let's say, for example, initially some microorganism starts colonizing on these rocks. So there are various microorganisms which start colonizing on these rocks, and once these rocks have been colonized by these microorganisms, by these different microorganisms rather. Why I say different microorganisms? Because you have different organisms which can survive even without any organic source for their nutrition. They can just eat the sand which is present, the sand devoid of any organic matter. They can eat rocks devoid of any organic matter. They can survive in the presence of light. They can survive without the presence of light. So there are different types of these organisms which start colonizing initially on the rocks. So once you have these organisms which have started colonizing on the rocks, they start eating up the minerals and also transforming them. So once that happens, you have this particulate matter which we term soil. So this is a process of bioweathering wherein we have the continuum rock mass being transformed into a particulate material called soil through the process of bioweathering, aided by physical and chemical weathering. Now, once you have this particulate material, all sorts of mechanics and the interaction takes place over here. So it interacts with the environment, it interacts with water. Once it starts interacting with water, it starts supporting more life and becomes a robust habitat for various types of organisms in it and various other processes. So now once that starts happening, it not just interacts with the environment, it will also start leading to production of various gases such as methane, such as hydrogen sulfide and other such gases. Nitrogen denitrification. Nitrogen is one of the major sources for our plants. So this is how the nitrogen fixation in the soil do also take place. The decomposition of waste materials, this is how it takes place. We just in case of municipal solid waste, when we tried when decomposition or other aspects of decomposition is being looked into, we really see that in the process of decomposition or in the process of landfill, we use soils at various stages. So this is how soil is actually promoting your decomposition in the soil or in the material. And that's when you get different types of gases. And of course, methane, I see that in the schedule in one of the sessions, you will be talking about gas hydrates. So this is where the formation of methane, hydrogen sulfide, nitrogen, all these gases comes into picture. So once this picture is known to us, the major question that we can ask ourselves is, are we really considering the chemical and biological loading on the soil? So definitely not. So how does this chemical and biological loading do actually affect the behavior of the soil? So let's say each one of these processes, let's dissect and see how these processes are important in understanding the biological relevance in geotechnical engineering. So let's say, for example, these are some of the examples from which I found on net. So from Brazil, wherein you have these weathered portions of the soil, the fungi and various other organisms which you must have studied, or which we already know some of the organisms. So these organisms, this is a weathered layer. There's a cross section where they were trying to construct a road, and they've encountered this cross section wherein you have a layer of weathered soil wherein most of the minerals have been diluted. This is a portion wherein the fungi has eaten up most of the minerals due to acidic nature of the created because of the fungi. So this type of weathering of soils will definitely affect the behavior of the soils, and specifically their engineering behavior, and that's where our geotechnical engineering gets affected because of the soils. So let me take some more examples. Let's say, for example, silicates. So silicates have, quartz is known to be subjected to very slow dissolution, but in case of fungi and where your nutrient limiting conditions occur, waterlogging occurs, and various other hazardous or anaerobic conditions occurs, fungi try to acidify the soil and try to dilute the silicate minerals in the soil. Silicates are one of the major minerals of our soils, I think, and Next, let's see how sulfide, which is another typical mineral found in the soil, gets affected because of this. Acidic environment, again, because of the various types of organisms in the soil, the various how do I say it? It's of different types of organisms, like say the cyanobacteria, the prokaryotes and the eukaryotes, which we find in the micro biological environment. So they start creating the acidic environment in the which oxidizes the sulfidic metals or the metallic ores, and then these processes have also been used for bioleaching and extraction of metals. So once we say it just weathers, the weathering has also been used for biological, extraction of metals from various sources, and also for sulfate reduction. This is another process which which can be used in the industrial processes. So next we have, this glaying of soils. There's a term called glaying of soils, which generally refers to the bluish, greenish tint, which the purple tint, the grayish tint onto the soil, which happens because of the excess waterlogging for a prolonged duration and anaerobic conditions which gets generated in the soil, which leads to dissolution of iron and manganese minerals in the soil. So this is typical of dissolution of the minerals of iron, wherein the metals or the minerals get oxidizes because of the anaerobic conditions, and it generally happens at the surface. That is why it is specifically mentioned over here as photosynthetically occurring process. It naturally, it's a general process which occurs at the very surface of the soils. And some other examples of such weathering of minerals could be the formation of stalagmites in terms of caves. Though it's generally not a weathering type of a process, the stalagmites you can find in some of the old caves, wherein you have this calcite crystals which start protruding from the top, and they also start extending from the down, and they form such pillars within the caves. And this is a typical example of boring in case of calcitic rocks, where the organisms, the microorganisms, start boring the mineral rocks, and they start weakening the rocks because of these perforations, and they lead to deterioration of the rocks. So these carbonate minerals gets influenced more specifically by the microorganisms than any other type of minerals, because they are more susceptible to the acid attack, because these carbonates are easily diluted in acidic environment, and a slightly acidic environment will also change the stability of these rocks, and they are also easily borable by the organisms as compared to the other minerals. So once we have known what these minerals can do, or what these minerals, how do these minerals weather, use this, or have we been using this in our day-to-day activities or in our scientific community of late? Yes. Say for example the bioremediation. Again, it refers back to my first slide wherein we talked about the bioweathering. So bioremediation is something is an extension of the bioweathering process which we are trying to engineer over here and trying to apply it onto the soils. Let's say for example you have the soil mass and you have some bacteria introduced into the soil. Now this bacteria will interact with this soil, with the surrounding environment, and will start precipitating or excreting its own metabolic products within the soil matrix. Now this material is also termed as extracellular polymeric substances, or generally it's termed as EPS, or you can also refer it to as the biofilm. The network of this EPS and the bacterial cells together is also sometimes referred to as biofilms. Now these have generally been used for remediating the different types of contaminants. Let's say for example the heavy metals. So now I can use the biological activity for containing the heavy materials within a specific boundary, so that the heavy metal doesn't diffuse into the groundwater and contaminate my adjacent region, geoenvironment. Or I can also try to precipitate these heavy metals by certain processes within the matrix of this biofilm. So I can also use the biological activity to consume this heavy metal. So there are various organisms and plants. You must have also heard of phytoremediation. So this phytoremediation can also be one of the aspects wherein the heavy metals can be can be used for uptake by the plants or the organisms. So similarly, it can be used for organic contaminants. So now in case of organic contaminants, it's much more robust as compared to heavy metals, because the organisms which we are using, the bacterial strains or any other or similar microorganisms that we use, they can be trained to consume organic contaminants. So suppose I say that I am not very conversant with cold climate, but over a period of time, if I start living in a very cold environment, like say for example 2 years, 3 years down the line, I get acclimatized to the cold environment. So similarly, somebody who is not comfortable in studying or in working in a particular type of stressful environment, you keep on working on limitations of or the lack of ability to work in a certain environment, we develop our resilience and we start maybe even liking the environment which we hated some time back. So similarly, the organisms can be made to acclimatize to these conditions and they start thriving over there. So initially all these environment, degradation of waste, heavy metals, organic contaminants, these are some of the environmental conditions which the organisms are generally not very familiar with. So if we try to make them like this environment, if we start exposing them to this environment, it's sort of the Darwin's theory of the survival of the fittest. So what they start doing is they start once they find that whatever nutrition they require, they are not getting, they will start living on these contaminants itself as their nutrition. So they have those inbuilt robust mechanisms in them, and that's how they start remediating your geo-environment. So now, how does this happen? It can be done by mineralizing some of these waste into a certain into a certain type of mineral and precipitating, or maybe limiting their movement within the geo-environment. That's like, say, we are trying to fixate it to a certain boundary. So when I say mineralization, how can we do it? There are different types of mineralizations. Say, for example, the induced type of mineralization, wherein the bacteria try to induce or with the help of its metabolites, it will help it will create an environment for me wherein I can work with this environment and form the mineral and try to precipitate the minerals of these contaminants. In some cases, the bacteria itself controls the mineralization process, and in some cases, the bacteria will just influence the mineralization process. Control and influence are very closely related terms, but they have very subtle differences, because in controlled, what is happening is the minerals will be forming within the bacterial cell, and in case of influenced, the minerals will be forming outside of the bacterial cell. So now this mineralization process is also related not just to bioremediation, it can also be used for, like, say, improving the properties of soil. So how do I do that? Let's say I have a very particulate material, very loose particulate material. I have certain bacterial strains. So if I can control the environment around, and if I can utilize the environment which is created by the bacteria, I can try to cement it. And once I cement it, now what has happened in this changed state of the material is that the engineering aspects are getting transformed. So how does that happen? Because I have changed the shear strength or the compressive strength of the material. I have changed the hydraulic conductivity or permeability of the material. So now, with respect to this, there is also a term called biocementation, and there is another term, called as bioclogging, wherein we try to control the permeability of the material or the hydraulic conductivity. So now the example shown over here, this is something, of course, biocementation is happening, but it's also leading to bioclogging, because you can see that most of the pores is cemented and completely filled up with the cementitious material produced by the bacteria, or maybe induced by the bacteria. So this is where the current day biogeotechnical processes, which the order of the day, I would say, or where most of the research is happening, is with respect to these aspects, how the bioremediation, bioweathering, biocementation is changing the engineering properties of the soil, and how does this affect the behavior of the soil. So in relation to this, we can also attempt to mitigate the liquefaction potential of the soil. The Kutch region, which is very much prone to the earthquake, Rajasthan, which has very fine, uniformly graded desert sand, and just imagine what happens if the soil is saturated and the soil very high liquefaction potential. So now with the help of biocementation, I can also try to mitigate the liquefaction potential, because essentially what I'm trying to do is those particles which were loose and unbound initially, let's say in this case, these particles were loose and unbound. And now once I have cemented, what's happening is I am trying to restrict their movement with the help of cementation. So essentially what happens with this is my liquefaction potential of the soil is reduced. There is another way where liquefaction potential is also reduced is, as I discussed during my first couple of slides, the generation of gas, different types of gases, the generation of nitrogen, hydrogen sulfide, methane gases. So once you have a saturated soil mass and you are trying to induce some unsaturation into the soil with the help of these gases, let's say there is some organism which produces nitrogen gas or produces methane gas, and it's producing small amounts of saturated soil mass. So what it's essentially doing is it's creating some sort of unsaturation within the soil, and this mechanism can be used to control the liquefaction potential of the soil. So from a civil engineering perspective, or from a very constructive perspective, from a very constructive agenda, if I look at how I can use the biological processes for the region where do I currently stay, we have a very huge border area wherein we do not have even the basic infrastructure facilities, the armed forces, or even for creating our border fencing. Creation of this fence itself is a huge task in the border areas, and if we can create some facilities, infrastructure facilities with the help of this, and if we can stabilize and create, like say, even a motorable road or a small pads wherein these type of structures can be erected, that itself is a huge huge leap forward, rather I would say, huge leap that we will be taking. Now, a similar example which I would quote over here is, this is a underground structure. I would not name where it is and what it was. This is an underground structure, very important underground structure, walkway, wherein you can see that there is a huge corrosion of, or huge degradation of the lining of this tunnel region is happening. And you can also see some amount of, if I just zoom it, this is some calcium depositions which is protruding down, just like the one we saw in the case of stalagmites in caves in a couple of slides earlier. So it is something very similar to that what's happening over here. So if this is the kind of deterioration that's happening, then it's our duty to restore and conserve our buildings, structures, and this can also happen in the case of monuments. So now in case of monuments, we will not be able to use different chemicals which may harm the natural rock or the materials used over there. So in which case we may have to go for usage of our biological processes, which do not harm the natural environment, which do not harm the natural rock which is existing over there, but it can try to remediate or rectify the existing problems over there. Like say for example the boring in carbonate rocks that we saw earlier. So now that can be used, that can also be remediated with the help of biocementation, because essentially in case of biocementation I am again cementing the rock mass. So how does this biocementation work, or what are the basic mechanisms of biocementation? There are various mechanisms of biocementation. So now I am a bit biased towards biocementation because this is where I have worked a little bit. I would say I am not, I mean, there's a huge way forward wherein we'll have to there's a huge way forward for us to work on this. So in my limited exposure, whatever I have had on biocementation, there are different various processes with which the biocementation can be achieved. And now this is where as practicing professionals would need to come forward and take up certain challenges and try to implement on a pilot basis in the field whatever we are trying to develop in the case of in laboratory conditions. So now once we do not implement any of these techniques in the field, we will not be aware of how and how much are we successful in case of implementation in the field, and where do we stand with respect to our laboratory technologies that we are trying to develop. And from a research point of view, there's a huge scope for implementing each one of these in the laboratory and in the field conditions, because none of these techniques have been implemented on a very large scale. And this is where as a country we can stand out and take up pilot studies in the field and see where how much successful we are, because biological studies performing in the laboratory and taking these biological studies, the bioreactors, into the field, there is a huge difference. It's like whatever we do in the laboratory is like an operation theater. It's a very sterile, controlled environment, and that's where all the technologies or the scientific ideas that we cook up in our minds, we try to develop. But then if that has to be transformed into the field, it's like the patient coming out of the operation theater and walking successfully on his or her own feet and leading his or her life for a longer duration after the surgery is done. Sorry. So now coming back to biocementation, there is a different types of processes wherein biocementation can happen. I will just concentrate on the urolytic bacteria process, wherein we are trying to do some studies which I have done during my PhD, and I'm also trying to work on right now, is this process using urolytic bacteria, wherein we try to cement the soils with the help of precipitation of calcium carbonates. But this is not the only process. This is where people have invested more time. I have invested more time and I have an affinity for this. But those of you who wish to start from now on, these are some of the other processes which do happen in nature, and these are some of the other processes, reduction of sulfate, reduction of iron, biochemical reduction of sulfate minerals or sulfate or iron minerals, or use of fungi for precipitation of again calcium carbonate, or use of algae and cyanobacteria, the two different microorganisms for precipitation of calcium carbonate underwater can also be used. Let me just take you through what urolytic, how biocementation happens through urolytic bacteria and why why biocementation works. We have a bacteria which produces certain, it is a bit of biochemistry. So biochemistry and biology essentially is going to be a part of our profession in the very near future. Why I make this statement also I will be coming to in a little bit. So we have the bacteria which produces a urease enzyme, and suppose if we have, so this is a urea molecule and this is water. So if we have a urea which in the presence of water, then what happens? It splits up this urea into ammonium and carbonate ions. So now this is the same urea which we also use as a fertilizer in case of our agriculture. Sorry, for our plants. So once we have this ammonium and carbonate ions, if we have a free calcium source, what will happen is it forms the calcite crystals around the bacteria. So now this calcite crystal is something very interesting because it's insoluble in water and it has a very binding property. It has a binding property which cements the soil grains, which I was discussing about a short while back. So this biocementation process will lead to cementation of the particulate matter. So now this has also been used in the literature, though I have not worked on it. This has also been used for different remediation or precipitation of some heavy metals along with calcium carbonate. So what will happen is essentially you are precipitating the heavy metals, like say for example nickel, along with calcium carbonate, and so what you will essentially be doing, you will be confining the nickel along within the calcite crystals, and so you will be confining the heavy metals within a certain zone. So with this biogenic calcite precipitation, why does it work? Let me just take the surface elastic modulus of, these are some of the different sands, and let me not just go into the details of what all these are, what different types of sands, but one material which I would like to highlight over here is the biogenic calcite. I think I should have removed this. Okay, let's just concentrate on the elastic moduli. So if we just see the surface elastic moduli of the calcite which was precipitated by the bacteria, you can just see the difference in the elastic modulus of the different soil grains and the calcite which was precipitated. So this is how the biogenic calcite can be very effective in nature, in its precipitation. So the next thing is, what are the important aspects in biocementation? What are the key aspects in this urea hydrolysis process? So urea hydrolysis process depends on various parameters. You have the urease and the urea. This is the enzyme, and this is the urea which is hydrolyzed by the enzyme. So this relates to the amount of cementation. That's essentially like how much of biocement I am going to get. So if I vary these two concentrations, I will be trying to play with the amount of biocement that I'm going to produce. And you can see over here there is a buffer medium. So buffer medium is essentially trying to play or I'm trying to work around with how fast I should precipitate the calcium carbonate or how fast should I produce the biocement. It's something like what you say for the setting time of your cement. So you have the initial setting time and the final setting time. So it's something very similar to that. So you're trying to play around with the type of biocement, with the delay in your biocementation process, because it's essentially trying to control the pH of the medium. So you can take the urease enzyme from two different sources. Say, for example, the microorganisms, Sporocercina pasteurii. You can search it on net, different organisms. Most of the organisms produce urease, but there are some organisms which produce urease to such an extent that you do not wish to consider any other organisms. So you also have the other other plant sources from where you can get the urease, and this is also termed as plant-induced calcite precipitation, and this is termed as microbial-induced calcite precipitation. So now in case of buffers, let me not just go into this. You have different types of buffers. You can use organic or inorganic buffers. The next aspect where the biological relevance in our day-to-day activities comes is our underground structures. I also showed one of the examples earlier. The tunnel wherein the lining was getting deteriorated and you had a calcium carbonate depositions from the lining of the tunnel. So you have the biocorrosion or deterioration of the underground pipelines, the buried pipelines. You have the underground cables which run through the soil, and these may be affected. We have deep foundations, pile foundations, the well foundations, caissons that we have for bridge piers. So these are some of the underground structures which are very prone to biological corrosion. This is more specific to the marine environment or our harbors and docks, wherein we have different offshore structures which are more prone to the biological corrosion or biological weathering because of different types of organisms present over there or different biological conditions that exist over there. So we generally try to work around with these materials by just, if we just see that evolution of how we have processed, how we have progressed in our field. We have done the soil characterization based on its physical characterization. Then we introduced another parameter into our understanding of the material, that was the chemical characterization and the mineralogy. We try to differentiate the material based on its mineralogy. Then we also try to differentiate based on what morphology of the material we have, what is the grain structure, what is the arrangement of particles and all that. But still we have certain amount of uncertainty left into the behavior of soil, and we still have certain amount of, to a great degree of uncertainty, I should say, in the behavior of the soil. That's why we try to introduce a factor of safety, and we try to say that, I have a factor of safety of 2.5, 3.5, 4. But can this void be filled up? It can be filled up, I feel, and this is my hypothesis that, biological characterization can, or understanding the material from the perspective of its biological nature, can lead to a better understanding of the material, understanding of the time dependency of the material and how this material is going to change. Let's say from 2 years from now, and because soil has a very good memory, it can also tell us how the soil has changed over a period of time previously, and we can also estimate how the soil can change over a period of time in the future. But the major thing which just a minute to the organizers, how much time more do I have for my presentation? Hello? Hello? How much more time do I have? How much more time do I have, ma'am, for my presentation?
So 35 minutes.
Okay, I will just take another 10 minutes and then we can participants, I feel.
Sure, sir.
Yeah. So let me just take you through a couple of important characteristics which need to take care while going through the biological processes in soils. The major thing is how do the bacteria attach to the soil. So now this is a bit of fundamental aspect related to the biogeotechnics as compared to what we have seen until now, wherein we have seen a broader aspect of what are the different types of applications of the biological aspects in soils. So now once I say the bacterial attachment, so there are various processes, various properties, you know, we must have heard the surface texture, how rough or how smooth the surface is. Because you know it is easier to move for us. Let's say for example we are moving on a smooth surface, the vehicle moves very smoothly and we do not get anywhere. Suppose say there are a very lot of undulations on a road and the road is very rough, our speed of movement will also, the friction that the road generates from because of the roughness is also very high. And not only that, if a very huge amount of undulations, then what happens is we may get stuck in some of the places. Let's say for example we have a huge pothole, we get stuck over there. So this is something very similar to that, wherein the surface texture plays a very important role. And of course, because we all know that our soils, especially the fine grained, are have a surface charge on them, and which we have different types of charge, different minerals carrying different surface charges on them. So similarly, bacteria is also also has a certain amount of surface charge onto it, and that's where the bacterial attachment onto the soil also becomes a parameter related to the surface charge. And then, of course, this is something which is very much similar to our interpersonal relationships. You know, the more time we interact, the more time we are connected with each other, we develop a rapport between two individuals, and our relationship becomes irreversible, or it becomes almost sort of a permanent one. We tend to move on with our friendships, with our closeness for a longer durations of time. So the more time the bacteria interacts with the soil, or the more time the bacteria or the microorganisms comes in contact with the soil, the more irreversible the attachment is likely to be. And please remember, it is likely, and it is not a mandatory condition, because various other parameters and the environmental forces are so high that they may get washed off considering the size of the bacteria that they have. And in a very short duration, it is very much likely to be reversible. And of course, the medium in which, or the environment in which they are trying to interact, it's again I would say that it's a interpersonal relationship, where two people meeting in a very hostile environment do not tend to have a very good interaction with each other. The moment you meet a person, you start having a heated argument, you tend to go off with that person for forever. So similarly is the case with the bacteria as well. So the pore fluid what exists between the soil and the bacteria, when they try to come in contact with each other, this plays a very major role. Now this is some example which I would just try to highlight from one of my studies, wherein we tried to map the surface texture of the soil and to see how the surface texture looks like, or how the surfaces looks like with the help of an AFM. This work was done at IIT Bombay along with Professor D.N. Singh. So this is where we tried to use an atomic force microscope. This is a atomic force microscope probe which scans the surface, it touches the surface and tries to trace over the surface. So you have a laser beam which gets deflected as and when this probe moves, and that is how this reflected beam is plotted on a photodetector for mapping the surface. So this surface I am trying to digitize it with the help of an AFM. This is a physical surface, and whatever I am getting over here is my virtual surface. So it's like my survey of this surface. I'm trying to survey the surface with the help of this probe instead of using a leveling staff, theodolite leveling staff, or using a total station. What I'm using here is a very minute equipment called AFM, which tries to scan the surface. And this is how a digitized surface would look like. Let me not just go into this of an image. You can see over here the bacterial surfaces, the bacterial strains which are sitting on a smooth glass surface. So these are some of the bacteria. So you can see over here the surface has been traced, and this is how the bacterial cells have been mapped. So similarly, you have a surface which does not have a bacterial attachment, and you have a surface which has a bacterial attachment. These are at two different locations. This is at one location and this is at a different location, because it's not possible. If you see the sizes, it's in terms of microns, it's very difficult to pinpoint on the very same surface. So just see if you can see over here, there are very small repeating patterns. So these are some of the bacterial strains which are attached onto the soil grains. Similarly, you have it on different surfaces. You can see over here again bacterial cells without bacterial cells. So this is how the bacterial cells tries to get attached onto the soil. And this is where the relevance of biological processes onto the geotechnical engineering comes into picture. And this is where I want to now interact with the audience, and I would like to have your feedback on this and see where are we heading and how can we head forward from here on. So can I stop sharing my screen and start interacting with the audience, or do you prefer these slides be as it is and we interact? Hello?
Hello.
Yes, sir. So, yes, please.
Sir, 2-3 questions I would like to ask.
Your voice is a bit muffling. There is some disturbance in the audio.
Now it's audible clearly. Still not.
Yeah, now it is clear because there is some echo in the voice.
I hope now it is clear.
Yeah, now it is clear, sir. Now it is clear. Yes, now it is clear.
Okay. Thank you, sir. So
Yeah.
thank you very much, sir, for your excellent presentation and throwing a light on the biological science and its application. Presently, at LD College of Engineering, we are also working on the same application, where we have collected some few samples of soil from all over Gujarat, particularly related to marine areas, that is coastal areas, and where we are identifying the presence of bacteria which are producing bioenzymes and urea enzyme and ureas. And on that basis, we are trying to collect the information regarding the natural compaction or the natural granularity which that soil has developed with respect to particular period over a time. Two three queries I have in this regard.
Yes, sir.
First of all, that the sustainability means what I mean to say here, that the bacteria, whatever have been developed, they continuously changes their phases with respect to the environment also, or we can say with respect to the surrounding temperatures and other things. So whenever we are trying to identify such type of bacteria, and we try to use such type of bacteria in laboratory, because in laboratory we have the control conditions, process becomes very easy.
Yes.
Okay, but every time it is not necessary that the bacteria which produces good bioenzymes or the carbonates may sustain in other environments also. So, because why I am asking, because we found it very limited research on this aspect, that how to infuse a bacteria of one place to the at another place, as far as their living conditions is concerned. So can you throw some light on this?
Yes. So it's very nice that, in fact, I must share with you that my induction into the biogeotechnics was initially from a point of view of biocementation, but when I was at IIT Bombay, there was a challenge which we had, and which one of the current IIT RAM faculties, Dr. Kannan Iyer, he was involved in some research of his own, and it was there where we had, where in fact he had initially identified that there is some biological activity going on in the soil which is actually leading to certain damages to the structure in and around that particular soil. So it's something very interesting to know that there are different such exercises are happening, and it's we are finding evidence of such activities on a very frequent occurrence. So now coming to your question, like how do we try to acclimatize a particular organism? Like say I am not a professionally trained microbiologist, so Please excuse me if I'm going wrong anywhere, or if there are any microbiologists over there, you can please correct me. So my limited understanding, because I have interacted with throughout, for the past 6-7 years, I have been interacting with some microbiologists on a day-to-day basis. So my understanding is, once you have a bacteria, like say for example, it is not tolerant to, I'll just try to explain it with the help of example that will be much more easier for me to explain. Say for example, you have a bacteria which is not tolerant to say benzene. Okay, it just grows in a non-benzene environment. So what you can do is you can try to add benzene slowly and slowly in very small quantities for the bacterial culture. Say for example, you are culturing the bacteria in the lab. So whatever the bacterial suspension you have it in your conical flask or in whatever you have cultured. You can try to add small amounts of, say for example, benzene into the growth medium when the bacteria is growing. So by every culture, when you start reculturing it again, you can keep on increasing the concentration of benzene. And for example, say on day 1 you start with 1% volumetric concentration of benzene. 1% by volume of benzene you are adding to your bacterial culture. So second day when you are culturing second time, you're adding it. You take from the same stock culture from your initial day, from your day 1, wherein you had added 1% benzene. So now for that culture, when you are reculturing it, you can add 2% benzene, then you can go to 3% benzene, then you can go to 5% benzene. Sequentially, if you keep on culturing it with keep on increasing the concentrations of benzene, then at some point of time, like it's a long drawn process, of course. This is a very simple process, but it's a very long drawn process. You can try to acclimatize the bacteria for that particular medium or that particular environmental or say pollutant or the toxic material, which initially was a toxin for the bacteria, may have now become the source of nutrition. So this is how urease producing bacteria is also, though it's a urease producing bacteria, it is not very conversant with the urea environment. So what we try to do when we try to culture this bacteria is we try to add some amount of urea to its growth medium, so that bacteria is fully well habituated to the presence of urea, and once we take it out and put it into the soil with a very urea rich concentrated urea medium, the bacteria doesn't find a shock. So it's something like why we inject IV into our body, saline, because our internal fluids, body fluids, are saline in nature. If we directly inject just water, what happens is the saline concentration of our body fluids decrease, and it becomes hazardous for our body. So this is something very similar to, the same methodology can be adopted for bacteria, but only thing is not every bacteria may get acclimatized to such conditions. There may be some limitations. So those kind of limitations we may have to identify it from the literature. So if we go into hardcore biological sciences, microbiology journals, so we will definitely find some information related to any type of strains that we can that we are trying to use in soil. But only thing is, how do we identify these type of strains is a big issue, because we are not professionally, professional microbiologists.
Yes, yes. Another thing, sir, also was observed that how to accelerate the rate of migration of these bacteria as far as the soil surface, or if you talk in terms of volumetric form, then how we can accelerate it, the rate of migration. Because it is the rate of migration only which is helping them to either gain the strength or to gain that structure. So, and another thing that as far as our geotechnical engineering is concerned, we are mainly concerned with the, in a simple words, a final product, let us say. That is,
that's right.
Okay. But when, as far as when the long-term loading system comes into picture, that is, if I am going for a long-term loading, then naturally the soil structure may not get affected in that way. But is there any possibility that there is any development of some different type of bacteria which are responsible for the breaking of such types in future?
Breaking of what? Sorry.
Breaking of soil structure in future.
I mean, this is where we can use the bio-weathering aspect and the boring type of organisms or the microorganisms for our for the purposes that we are intending to look into. Now, when you say the migration of organisms within the soil, there are some literature which definitely talk about accelerating this process by applying some sort of electrical potential to the soil and trying to make the the electro-osmosis kind of process, electrokinetics in the soil, which is used. So similar techniques people have tried, but they are not very successful. That's what I find in the literature. Now, this is an aspect which we can try to work on, and this problem comes in the case of fine-grained soils. I think, if I'm not wrong, are you referring to fine-grained soils more specifically?
Yes. Mostly clay soils.
More specifically, clay soils because of the pore sizes. And another issue which I have observed, in this case, in case of fine-grained soils, is that the pore sizes of these soils are also very minute. So how do we try to send these organisms over there, and how are these organisms trying to stay over there? Like, say for example, I have a 2 feet door. I can just walk in. If I just say I have a 1 feet opening, and if you ask me to walk through it, I will not be able to walk through it. Maybe in a certain orientation I may walk through it. I may not be able to walk through it freely. Suppose, say, there is a half an inch opening, and if you say I have to walk through it, it will not be possible. So similar is the case with bacteria. The pore sizes, I mean, if we are trying to inject the bacteria into clay, it's a different scenario, because the clay, we may have compacted it, the pore sizes may be different, the size opening for the bacteria to even sit in over there may be very small. Now, but in case of natural soils, they happily thrive in such clay soils. So this is something which which we can try to understand from the nature, how it is being, how does it happen, and we can focus our further research in. This is one of the major directions I think we can focus our studies on and see what factors do actually reflect on the survival of the bacteria over there.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Because many of these I'm able to
Because
relate
bacteria
to. Yes, please,
bacteria
please,
will
please.
survive only when they will get some nutrients.
Yeah, one is nutrient and the other is their physical space that they need for to sit over there. In many a times, if we are compacting clays and the pore sizes may be smaller than the size of the single cell bacteria itself. So that is also possible. Most of the pore sizes can can be of that smaller size. So I am able to relate to the kind of difficulties or the kind of questions that you are having, because these are some of the questions which I also do have in it, and this is where I think we can think of working
Yes.
towards a common goal.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank
Any
you.
more questions from participants? Please raise your hands if anyone wants to ask the question. I think, sir, there are no questions. So,
Okay.
okay. So, thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your excellent presentation and giving an insight over the biological sciences. So, thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
And I would like to thank the organizers, Dr. Shah and his entire team for giving me an opportunity to interact with you all, to connect with you, and I would be more than happy to be associated with any of you. If you wish to know more about biogeotechnics, or if you do have any interest related to this, then you can certainly drop an email. My email is also available with Dr. Shah. I think he can
Definitely, sir.
also share.
Definitely. Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Definitely.
and specifically for the practicing engineers who are working with government projects, or who are actually posted at site. So if we can come together and try to implement some of the laboratory technologies or the laboratory ideas that we have developed up until this point, that will be something great, because it gives us some learning point where we can start and move ahead. So I thank you all for being a part of this, and the organizers once again for giving me an opportunity and inviting me for my presentation over here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's our privilege that you have accepted our invitation and you spared your valuable time and knowledge to us, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
No, it's my privilege. It's my privilege that you have invited me. And thanks a lot for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Definitely,
Thank
we will
you.
be working in future together, sir.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Why can't you know speaker no? Dear participants, So this was an excellent presentation by Dr. V.S. Shashank sir. Now moving ahead with our fourth session of the day. So